Just some corn. Oh, well, there it is. Here we are. Wow, everybody's right on time. Okay. Okay. Okay, Deb, is the video set to go?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the February 18, 2020 City Council regular meeting. I'm Mayor Benson Wong. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Good evening, Mayor. Mayor Benson Wong.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Wendy Weicker. Here. Councilmember Lisa Anderl. Here. Councilmember Jacobson. Here. Councilmember Salim Neese. Here. Councilmember Craig Reynolds. Here. And Councilmember David Rosenbaum. Here.
Okay. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we move to our first item of business to approve the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, there is a motion by Councilmember Anderall and a second by Councilmember Jacobson. All in favor say aye. 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 Okay. Motion passes and the agenda is approved. We now move to the first item on the study session. Agenda Bill 5664, Classification and Compensation Discussion. The Chief of Administration, Ali Speets, will start that discussion. Welcome.
Thank you and good evening. As the mayor said, I'm Ali Speets. I'm Chief of Administration. Recently, duties added to my plate were the HR division, so I am heading that up. Tonight with me is Stephanie Brown. Stephanie has 30 years experience in HR, 29 of them with the city of Tukwila, and she was the director there for the last 9 years of her career. She has graciously signed on with us as a consultant. She is my phone a friend, and I'm very grateful for her. She's a lot of knowledge and experience in the HR world. Also, I would like to say I don't. I am learning as I'm going. There is a lot to learn. HR covers so many different things, and so I appreciate our employees' patience with us and council's patience, and hopefully we are just keep moving along. So tonight we're here to talk to you about a compensation and classification study that we would like to do for non-represented employees. And I want to talk a little bit about public sector compensation and long-term, the city's long-term compensation strategy, and then about the compensation and classification study. If you have questions along the way, please feel free to ask them. This is meant to be a conversation with you about these issues. So first of all, in the public sector, it's usually seen as stable employment and wages with good benefits. And the salaries of all public employees are public, so they are out for the world to see. In the private sector, there are a lot more perks. There's stock options and usually large bonuses in good times. And all the salaries are confidential. You don't know what your coworkers are making, usually. There are many laws that impact public sector pay. So there's the FLSA, the Fair Labor Standards Act. What that really does is determine whether an employee is exempt or non-exempt, which is hourly or salary. It does other things too, but that's one of the main pieces of it. We also have our leave acts. So there's the Family Medical Leave Act, and there's the Washington Leave Act, and the Washington Paid Family Medical Leave. They all do different things, and they are all pretty strict in how they can be administered and what the benefits are to each of the employees. There's also Washington state bargaining laws. We have to bargain hours, wages, and working conditions with the unions. There are staffing requirements for safety-sensitive positions. We do have infrastructure here, our water and sewer and stormwater, and so there are specific certifications that we have to keep those systems safe. That's just one example. There's also police and fire. And then we have recruitment challenges. It's hard. It's hard to get somebody into the public sector for various reasons, good times and bad. Another factor about the public sector of compensation is the comparable market. Who do we compare to? How do we compare to them? Which is part of your long-term compensation strategy. For us, we also maintain lean staffing levels. I know that it sounds like a broken record, but if you compare us to other cities of our size and services, we are very leanly staffed compared to them. One of the things we also do is we go through a pretty extensive internal review process when there is a vacant position. So we're looking whether to see, can these duties be moved into another position? Do we need a full-time position? So we have a pretty stringent way that we review each vacant position and what we want to do with it. And as you know, some of those have remained vacant right now, and some of them have gone away. We also have a pretty effective performance management system. We have a way that we check in with our employees on an annual basis to let them know how they're doing, to help in areas that need improvement, and it tends to keep everybody on track. So in talking about represented compensation, those are our unions. We have 4 bargaining units: AFSCME, police, police support, and fire. And we are obligated to bargain hours and wages, working conditions, and any changes to those. So a change that may be simple in the private sector to employees' policies can be a handful in the public sector because we do have to bargain those.
Ally, can you just
Yep.
again, the acronym, can you?
AFSCME,
Yeah.
affiliated. It's just like, it's like Teamsters.
Yeah, I worked with Teamsters, so I didn't have AFSCME as a union that I bargained with, so I'm not familiar with the
Yeah,
AFSCME term, but.
I'll send you an
yeah,
email with it.
I don't know them as,
It's, municipal employees is the end of it, so. Thank you, look at that.
yeah.
Yep, you're right. Yes. Okay, so, represented compensation, these are a few of the policies that we have, which salaries are benchmarked to the midpoint of the comparable market. Collective bargaining usually occurs every 3 years, sometimes it's 2. Almost everybody every year receives annual COLA increases, cost of living adjustments. There have been years that some unions have not taken a COLA because we were in the recession. And then we compensate employees in the unions using a step system, which is the basis of like how long they've been here, what skills do they have, combination of those. Non-represented compensation, those are employees that are in the city's management and professional level employees. Again, paid at the midpoint average of the comparable market. And they receive a flat rate, which is benchmarked to the midpoint as opposed to a step system. This is where we're getting into classification. Market studies or market analysis or salary studies are conducted every 3 to 4 years. And non-represented employees receive an annual COLA, budget allowing. Okay, so the city's long-term compensation strategy is that we strive to create a balance between fair and equitable pay and exercise fiscal prudence given our reliance on property taxes. I did not make this up. This is from the budget document. So again, these are the policies that are listed in that document, which is also Exhibit 2 of your agenda bill. Salaries are benchmarked at the midpoint of the defined market. All employee groups, total compensation includes base pay, steps, and other compensation. Vacant positions are reviewed. We want to remain competitive at approximately the midpoint. It comes up a couple times about the midpoint. And then our comparable cities criteria, and that employees must share the cost of their health benefits. And then compensation decisions will be made using the best data available. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. However, we have gotten to a place where We haven't had this done since 2001. I found that this weekend. I had originally had over 20 years, but I actually found the last time this was done in 2001, and it was done for a small group of employees. So we really want to look at our current salary schedules for non-represented employees, so that's your management and your mostly management positions, sorry. And then we want to develop a classification system. Our current classification system is not very descriptive. And if you look at other cities in the Puget Sound area, they have an actual table that shows the salaries and the step systems. And we'd like to move more towards that versus kind of, ours seems to be a little subjective. And we want this study to provide recommendations for how we modify our salary schedule and our classifications. We really want to, we want to do this because we want to make this a great place to work, continue making this a great place to work. But we also want to be competitive. So the comp and class study, Exhibit 1 in your agenda bill, we put the scope of services in instead of putting the whole 12-page RFP in there. We just put this part. And so that's what we're really looking to the council tonight. It's the second bullet, the classification and compensation analysis piece. These are kind of the steps that we're asking a consultant to do for us. I'm not going to read through every single one of them because I read through most of the other stuff on my presentation. But in looking at these 10 different things, does the council have questions, concerns, changes, additions about what we are asking a consultant to do? And I just want to say that between Stephanie and I, we may not be able to answer your question, but we will write it down and we will get back to you. I don't know everything, and Stephanie doesn't know Mercer Island, so, but we're happy to, yeah.
You want to go back to the
Yeah, let's go to the previous one.
Let's go through, well, yeah, 1 through 5.
There we go. So I made it shorter to fit on the slide, but step 1, is to conduct this job audit of all the positions. And so we would pull together all the job descriptions, and you're then looking at those job descriptions for consistency. Following with that is a position description questionnaire. So this would be something that's developed that goes to each employee, and each employee is saying, here are the things that I'm doing in my job. And then that would then go to supervisors, and the supervisors would then say, here's what the employee is doing, here's what I think. Yeah. Well, the only thing I'm saying is then the job description, that questionnaire, and the supervisor's comments are all put together. They're reviewed and revised.
So then I wonder if you could just speak to how you're going to look within departments and across departments for kind of that consistency and leveling and pay and all of that kind of stuff? I mean,
That's
tell
why
me
we're
about the
hiring the
within and
consultant.
across.
Yeah.
So maybe what you're sort of expecting to see based on what you've done before. I'm curious how you think
Yeah.
that might play out and how that
Can I-
usually works.
Can I chime in here, Councilmember Weicker? One of the things I'll point out, and Stephanie can tell us a little bit more about her experience, is in the last 20 years roughly, we have gone to market every 3 to 4 years, but we've gone department by department. And so one of the things we missed was the internal equity piece, doing exactly what you're describing, which is why it's time to take a step back and do a citywide compensation and classification study. It's going to sweep up that data that was missed previously. And Stephanie or Allie can talk a little bit more about how that's done.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sure this is on. Good evening, council. I'm not sure that it's, as Jesse mentioned, it comes as a part of the review process. So typically internal equity comes into play a lot when you have positions that you're not able to benchmark out into the market, but you have to have a way to compare them to something. So you tend to look internally to what you have that might be comparable. So say if you have a permit coordinator, well, permit coordinator is a pretty common job. I can't think of something, but something that isn't common that you can actually benchmark out in the market. You would kind of look internally to see where you might be able to place that person in your system. So that's typically how it is looked at as you get further into the development of the compensation structure.
Jake, you have a question?
Are there, as to number 2 on your list here, are there existing, what we call my company JSAs, job descriptions for positions? Do they exist at the present time?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
when?
we have job descriptions for every position, but some of them have people in that position that have been here for 25 years, and the description hasn't been looked at. Some of them, not all of them.
And would I be correct in assuming that part of this process would be updating those to current, what's current, as opposed to what might have been
Yep.
going on 2000, 2001?
Yes, so it'll be taking the current job descriptions and along with that questionnaire that's in number 2, and saying, okay, well, the job description says you do X, Y, Z, and the employee will say, well, now I do A, B, C. And so it's a matter of updating all those job descriptions based upon what the employee's actually doing. Is that making sense?
Right, it's taking a current snapshot of what the incumbent does, but they're looking at it from, not only from what they do, but what would you like a person coming into that job to be able to do? So you typically look at jobs, their essential functions, what do they do? Any representative duties that may be secondary to essential functions, their knowledge, skills, and abilities, their certification requirements, what education they may need to have. All those things are going to be the story of what the employee does. And then you take that and you match it to what the current description says. Most of the time, you're going to probably end up revising a lot of the job descriptions because it's been so many years since you've done them that they'll probably just become what the position analysis questionnaire shows as being the current functions. So that's been my experience with how position questionnaires work.
Okay. Dave, and then Craig.
I had a question about number 5. I know you, thanks for the list of cities that's sort of on that comparison list. How do you then look at the private sector for similar positions? So, for example, if we were hiring a software engineer, how would we, do we compare
You
that all with-
wouldn't.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. The focus is going to be comparing, the comparable market will be with public sector. Comparing a software engineer that works for a city with a software engineer that works for Amazon, it's not comparable. So it wouldn't be considered, it just wouldn't be done.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yes, in my years of experience, I've never seen private sector and public sector compare. It's always public sector to public sector, just because you may not be able to benchmark a specific position to the private sector they may not have. So say a custodial position, they probably contract their custodial services because they're a private business, whereas you have in-house custodians that do their work. Their work may be the same, but they don't come from the private sector company per se.
Yeah, I understand
Yeah.
the challenges in benchmarking it, but I want to make sure if there's any way to make sure we're at a competitive balance with some of
Right.
these, it'd be helpful to know how far off are we on some of these jobs that do have roles in both the public and private sector.
There are private studies out there, like Milliman is a compensation company that does a lot of private sector review. So you can actually look at Milliman studies. You can look at different
Craig
studies.
Craig
Oh,
works for the
So you can, yeah.
Yes, I was gonna say.
There are other studies out there that you can actually take a look at that show private sector. You can kind of get a glimpse of what that might look like. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
So the other thing I wanted to mention along with this is that we're also going to be asking this consultant to help the council develop a compensation philosophy and policy. So we have the current one. Jesse and I, City Manager Vaughn and I, interim City Manager Vaughn and I for another how many minutes? We are recommending that we take the long-term compensation budget policy out of the budget, and it is becoming more of a living document, whether we put it in an ordinance or a resolution. But that's something that is coming back to the council on a regular basis, and it's not lost in a 600-page document. So, sorry, I just want to put that side note in.
Craig, you have a question?
2, actually, I hope I can sneak in. One is, you mentioned benchmarking compensation. Will that be focused on salary only, or will you be looking at benefits as well?
We're going to ask the consultant to look at everything, total compensation, which includes salaries and benefits. It includes leave. It includes kind of everything that could be considered compensation.
Okay,
So,
excellent, glad to hear
yeah.
that. Second thing, one thing that worries me about doing a study like this is what you do with the results, and this may be a question for an interim city manager to respond to, but you know, inevitably, if you do this study and find that somebody's very underpaid, there's immense pressure to up them to market. And if they're very overpaid, it's somewhat problematic to cut the pay for a number of reasons. And I
Yeah.
just wonder, from those of you, Stephanie, if you've done these studies before, how have cities typically reacted in that situation? And from our interim city manager, what's her expectation of how she would react in that situation?
Stephanie, do you want to talk? We've spent quite a bit of time talking about this. You can share your experience.
Yeah, it varies. I think the city council that I work with was very hands-on into the compensation philosophy of the city of Tukwila. They really wanted to be involved, where they actually determined who the criteria for who they compared to, so that would be used when we go out to market. I would say after you get through the compensation study, you have to take the advice of the compensation professional to say what might be the best way to approach it. They will give you options that you can consider in terms of when you have positions below the market, when you have positions above the market. So I think options should be something you should put in front of you. I think it'd probably be too early to jump the gun to figure out what those are now until you get the data back. But the consultant will be able to say what they would recommend that you do in cases. You could freeze wages until the market catches up as one thing. I mean, they're not going to be the most pleasant things to have to consider, but I think the compensation consultant should be able to give you some recommendations based on their experience as to what you might want to look at when it comes to below and above the market numbers that may come back.
I have a question.
I just wanted to take on, if I can interrupt you real quick, Mayor. I believe it was last council, I forwarded the Issaquah classification and compensation study, and I may go find that email and forward it to this council. Issaquah did a process that ended up going for 2 years. It met some hiccups, and I think they transitioned consultants midway through. But they actually developed a formula that I don't know off the top of my head, but based on where your position was in the market, that determined how the salary was handled. So if you were over by X percent, you were actually brought back down into market. If it was, I think that was like 25%. They had some positions that were real high. Some were just frozen. Others were caught up. So to Stephanie's point, your consultant will be working with you on implementation recommendations. So what do we do now that we have the data?
Yeah, and compensation professionals that I've worked with, there's some industry standards that say if your positions are below 5%, above or below 5%, they're typically competitive. Anything 10% to 12% or up to 15% can be considered misaligned, and therefore those positions may need to be looked at in terms of a reclassification possibly. So there are some standards out there that they probably would recommend as to if you're within 5 to 10%, you're probably fairly competitive, and there may not be much that you have to do. It's just those positions that may be 10%, 12%, 15% above that could be misaligned, and you may need to look at whether they should be reclassified or not to fit them into whatever structure you have.
And what is our legal liability if we find somebody is undercompensated and don't react?
That would probably be a question for the city attorney.
Fortunately, you're sitting right there.
Thank you. Unless there's a employment contract that covers the employee, and for the most part, other than contracted employees, the only full-time employee with a contract is the city manager here. So I do not see much of a liability as far as contractual liability. And there's no, other than, the minimum wage laws and overtime compensation, there's no requirement that city planners make at least $50,000 or city attorneys make at least $120,000 or anything like that.
I was gonna say 200, so I was getting.
But correct me if I'm wrong, we are potentially exposed if we found, for example, that women were consistently underpaid and men overpaid relative to market, for example.
I will not comment on, like what liability. I mean, I will comment in open session. If you'd like me to expand on it in executive session, I can, definitely get onto the topic. But it's my practice not to comment on potential city liability during open session.
Makes sense.
Thank you for understanding.
So if I can also just offer a quick comment, as we're starting to work through this, I think it's important for us to zoom out and look at our policy. Our policy right now says we try to bench to the midpoint. And in our recent experience, we're struggling with that policy in some areas. So technology positions and engineer positions, anybody working in construction trades where the market is really hot right now, midpoint salaries may not be serving us as well. So we need to think about how we might review that policy and possibly modify it. So you'll have that opportunity. And I just wanted to point that out. That looks a little bit different than just salaries going up and down. That's possibly looking at a change to your overall policy on compensation.
Celine, go ahead.
So in that zoom out kind of theme, when I looked at this and I looked at the potential scope of work and the cost, a lot of this feels like what a HR director would do if we had one. I know that position is vacant. You know, the position descriptions, the truing up of people's credentials to match their position descriptions. I get that some of the salary research is probably something that a consultant would do. But can you kind of just speak to the body of work and what of this is kind of regularly, routinely done internally, but we're having to utilize you because that position is not filled?
Yeah, it varies. With 4 bargaining groups, the city of Tukwila had 8 unions. And so a lot of the work that I did focused in on labor at some point. So oftentimes it's hard to get to the descriptions like you would like to, or the policies that you would like to, because other things become priority. Either there's mandated laws that come into effect that you have to jump to pursue to do. So these are very important things that should be at the top of an HR list, because you want to keep your class descriptions current as you can. And you also want to go out to the market to make sure that your salary structure stays intact and it has the ability to have growth in it for the future, plus opportunities for promotions within. So from my perspective, comp and class should be the high priority in organizations, but because of other things that come in, they may not always be. So it just depends on what you have going on within your your city organization that consumes a lot of HR's time. But I really do believe that class and comp is an area where a lot of cities are not making them a priority. If that addresses your question.
It does.
It doesn't.
And so the last thing I wanted to address is, as Ally went through those first slides, a lot of that, based on the knowledge that I have, felt very aspirational. It may have been what we said we would do, but like we learned, some things haven't been done necessarily in quite some period of time. In terms of this process, and in the addendum here, it says that there will be a project team. You know, the council has said this is a priority of the council as well. This wasn't just staff saying we want to do this.
Yep.
The council said we need to do this. And so the council has a lot of interest in making sure that this process has integrity, that the body of work was completed, you know, across the scope of the organization to the extent that you'll do it. Is there ever a role for council to be involved in any of those meetings or working groups? Not knowing who's on it, I didn't even know if that was considered.
Absolutely.
We haven't truly defined the project team. I think it's going to be probably leadership team. And I want the consultant to come to the council as often as the council needs the consultant to come, because I think there is a stepped process to all of this. I think there's a heavy lift at the beginning where we're trying to look at all these job descriptions, and then there's going to be steps along the way where the consultant needs to come back to you. I mean, they can't go do a market analysis if they don't know what your market is. So we're going to need them to come back to all of you and say, here's what we think. React to it. Tell us what you think. What do you want? And I think that process. That if the council can be involved at that step, then the consultant can move forward with the correct information and with the correct policy direction, so we aren't circling back around and doing it again.
Yeah, I would just say, do whatever you can to have as much credibility inserted into this process on behalf of the citizens, the council.
Yes.
That we're represented too.
Yep, absolutely.
Transparency is very important.
So I'm going to follow up on a process question, and then I have a question I wanted to ask based upon, I think it was number 5 on the screen. as far as comparable cities, that's one thing that we've always talked about. And I guess, Stephanie, you haven't probably had a chance to go through it all, but my question is, are those the right cities? I mean, you'll be looking at that whole issue, I assume, as far as what is the right comparable city for Mercer Island to look at.
Correct. The consultant will help you to define who you compare to. Now, from my experience, the city council of the city of Tukwila believed that they wanted to compare to cities that were plus or minus 50% of their assessed valuation. And that was very important for them. So that was a criteria that they established, that when we go out to market, we're going to look at cities that are plus or minus 50% of our assessed valuation. So that was clear criteria to use. So whenever those cities, whenever the evaluations, I think it was the assessed valuations come in at the fall. So during the fall time, when the assessed valuation was posted by the King County Assessor, we would know who those cities would be that we would be comparing to during that time, whoever fell above or below 50%. So that was just what they wanted specifically to see in terms of who we used as our comparables, those cities that fell within those percentages.
And there's a rationale behind that. I mean,
Yeah, typically it's because, it's kind of objective. It's not a subjective thing. It's objective. There's numbers there. There's data there to support that. Tukwila is a full-service city, 100,000 population in the daytime, 19,000 population in the nighttime. So they have a lot of things that they can't use, like population size, for one thing, or demographics. There's certain things that just wouldn't fly because of the way the city is structured, their dynamics of their population. So those are the things that the City of Tukwila Council really wanted to be very specific about, using certain metrics to help them define who they felt that they compared to that were static, and they just would change based on whatever the assessor's assessed value would be.
Okay. So I'll
Yeah,
look
a
forward
few
to
cities
that.
in and out. It wouldn't change very much, but there might be a few that fell in or fell out any given year, but it wasn't
Okay.
a grave change.
Jake?
I was, appreciate your comment about assessed valuation, and that's one of my, concerns is whether we factor in what the financial posture of the city is. For example, I've heard or been led to believe that City of SeaTac is sitting on $50 million worth of stuff, and they have, from everything I see every time I go to the airport, a lot of sales tax generating activities down there, and we don't. So my question would be whether that is a factor. In other words, what's our revenue base look like? Because that, in the end, is one of the realities with which we have to deal. So that's a suggestion, not disguised as a question.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. I understand. Having done some work with Federal Way recently, they're doing the same thing, and that, there's a variety of different criteria that they're looking at, sales tax. So it just depends on what it is you as a council would like to consider as you determine who you feel that you are comparable to, because that is something that's going to move forward with you into the future. Once you set those guidelines as to, we feel that, these are, based on these criteria, these are the agencies that we feel truly match Mercer Island as a whole. So the consultant will come back to you with some options and recommendations and things to consider, and you'll just have to decide where you would like to be and what you would like to look at.
Wendy, Jeff?
So as part of your evaluation, do you anticipate identifying positions that we should have, or positions that should be divided, or positions that should be changed a bit, or is it just looking at the staff and positions and structure that we have at the moment?
I think it's just looking at the current existing structure, and just making sure that your existing structure is updated, and then creating a compensation system around your current positions.
And we will include the positions that are vacant
Yeah.
in that, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Craig?
As you do your benchmarking, will you also be looking to see what the compensation target is for the other cities? Are they all striving for midpoint, or are some of them striving to be at the 70th percentile or 10th percentile?
I'm sure that the consultant that we hire will do that. I'm sure that they will be looking at the cities around us. How do they do this? What are their benchmarks? What
Okay,
are their,
that would be
yeah, what are
very
their
helpful.
points?
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And I just want to remind the council, in terms of steps, first step is for you to reconfirm our compensation policy and our benchmarks and how we get there before we start work on the data. So that will be something, I think, Ally, in quarter 2-ish. Yeah.
Ally, can you actually elaborate more on the process? I'm looking at task 3 meetings and task 4 deliverables. And I guess also to Councilmember Nice's point regarding how many touches the city council might get, I did see that it calls for one meeting or a meeting with the city council. I assume that potentially we can have more than that.
Yes, and
Plus-
I apologize. The version that got put in here, I left one out, and it basically says what I said to Councilmember Nice, which is consultant will come back at council meetings as needed for policy direction.
Okay, and then there's also a reference, I think, in, under task 4, number 2, to presentation to the community. So is that part, does the community have any role in this, or is there just a presentation? Or is it just a presentation by the consultant to a regular meeting here that's open to the public to, this is number 2.
Oh, it's meant to be one meeting
Okay.
where it's being presented at a city council meeting to staff and community at one time.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
But go ahead and
Clarify.
elaborate on the time frame, I guess, that we're looking at.
The time frame. Well, we had put in, oops, I'm going the wrong way, pardon me. We had put in the agenda bill that it would take 10 to 12 months. The reason that we did that is we do not know what we do not know. I think that there have been studies that have been done very quickly, and there are studies that have taken 2 years, like Issaquah. And so we wanted to be reasonable about it. The other thing is this will require staff's assistance, staff's help. And I'm filling 2 directors' positions, including other work of my own, in managing staff. And so we don't have a lot of people to do this work. So I think we're trying to be reasonable about when and how long it will take. I imagine the first part, where we're collecting all the job descriptions and the questionnaires, that's going to be your biggest lift. That's going to take a while. Stephanie is actually doing this right now for Federal Way, and it's pretty tedious. And it all depends on the firm or the consultant that we choose. What's their staffing? How many people do they have to dedicate to us? And as far as the cost goes, the estimate there, I think that that's all dependent kind of, again, on how long the consultant thinks they'll take. So we're kind of asking within this RFP for them to outline how long they think it will take to do the work we've asked.
Okay. Any other questions?
So I just want to confirm, because we do want to get this detailed correct in the RFP. It sounds like the council would like, periodic check-ins. I'm assuming we need to build in at least 4 or 5. Is there anything else that would impact the scope of the final contract, which, by the way, we will have to come back to for an appropriation to do this work? Anything else is the deliverable, something that we need to really make sure we include in this RFP?
Dave?
To the extent possible, I would encourage you to find someone that has obviously a lot of experience doing this elsewhere, but also in communication with staff. I think the last thing we want to do is sort of send shockwaves through the whole building here that we're looking at everyone's salary, and there's
Yeah.
a chance we have enough open positions as is.
Yeah.
So to the extent possible, that would just be one of my asks there.
And we have made that clear in a couple places in the RFP document, and then, of course, in this, is that there needs to be a strong communications plan for staff. And we have notified staff of this meeting tonight and that we're going to be moving forward with it. But, yeah, we do not want to create an environment where people are worried or fearsome, so.
Okay, thank you.
And I take it that communication plan with employees is to all employees or just to the non-represented employees?
I think it would be information that would go to all employees. I think maybe some specifics about the actual steps that are being taken. If there's employees that are not impacted by that, I think that we would probably just narrow it down to the non-represented. One of the things that we do want to do is create a classification system that includes all jobs. And that won't change the job description or the salary necessarily of anyone that's in a union. It's just going to put their position in a classification, whether it's a code, a number code, a letter code. And so all the positions will be touched in some way, but nothing will change except for just that classification for members in the union.
Okay. Salim?
So on task one, bullet one, the consultant shall coordinate with the city's project manager throughout the project. I'm starting to kind of get the sense that might be you,
Yes.
Ally. I think because this is such an important and a long body of work, right? This is going to affect every position, every employee of the city in some way or another. That it's important in the RFP and the final contract that the city manager be listed as directing and ultimately responsible for this project. So that this isn't just something that we hand off to, no offense, staff, right? That this is something where the genesis is city manager working with council. It's not that she needs to manage it, but I think I would try and find a way to work ownership of this project into the city manager's hands.
I'll take my direction from the city manager.
Any other comments or questions for Stephanie or Ally?
I'll just say thank you for taking this on and making it work, and I think it's long overdue, and I think we'll all benefit from the information that you're able to collect and analyze and report back, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So we are,
We're way ahead of schedule, so how do you
know.
want to do this, city manager, or interim city manager?
I would actually recommend we probably take a break to bring
Okay.
us back to
6:30,
agenda
okay.
at 6:30.
Okay, well. Okay, we are now on break until 6:30.
Yeah, turn that on, unless I turn it on for you over.
Oops. Next item on the agenda is the interim city manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council and the community. Looks like we're still feeling a little wintry here with this scene, although we had wonderful sunshine today. Hey, did you see the big truck out front of City Hall when you came in today? That is our new sewer utility truck. It's a combo Vector jetter truck, which means it blows into the sewer line and it sucks everything back out. Pretty gross stuff. I was told, our Public Works Director said, if you take a selfie, just keep your distance because it is being used right now. In fact, we put it into service January 7th. We have so far jetted over almost 27,000 lineal feet of sewer pipe. So it's a busy, busy vehicle. That truck works with closed circuit television equipment, so we can actually see in the line. We know what's going on. Primary work is for maintenance, getting in there, cleaning out your sewer mains, and then dealing with all sorts of sewer problems. This is work that we just moved in-house. We used to contract for this work. Our early analysis was that it would actually save us money. We think so. This piece of equipment is being used daily. And one of the benefits, if you have a sewer line problem, is we have a piece of equipment now on Mercer Island and we can deploy immediately. So far, good news. The cost of the vehicle was a little over $450,000. If anybody would like a ride along, Jason Kittner, our Public Works Director, just appeared and he would be happy to show you the truck in action. And he also asked me to remind everybody, your toilet is not a garbage can. So these are some pictures of things that we have pulled out of the sewers recently. Our favorite no-no is baby wipes and cleaning wipes. They just make a mess of our sewer system. We've also found mop heads, your car keys for your BMW, cell phones, t-shirts, swim shorts, lots of money, flashlights. And I said, what's the most interesting thing you found? I can't even say this with a straight face. And he said it's not appropriate for a council meeting. So anyway, all right, there's your public service reminder. Don't flush other things down the toilet. Changing subjects entirely. This is just a reminder that the public comment period for the King property or the Jinghua property is open through Wednesday, February 26th. We've received a lot of questions since we put out the notice, particularly around how many parking spaces, how many units. So what came in, remember this is an application, it's in for review right now. 203 total parking spaces, about 170 for residential and 35 for retail. The plan right now, remember it's in for review. It's not finalized. It's 11 studios, 110 one-bedroom units, 29 two-bedroom units, and 12 three-bedroom units. So if you'd like to provide feedback, we do have a Let's Talk page up, and this will be going to the Design Commission. Also, this went out last week in our weekly news. The draft environmental impact statement for the East Seattle School, the demolition of the East Seattle School, was issued February 10th. We also have a 30-day public comment period open through March 11th. And there's a community meeting on this site planned for February 27th at the community center. Again, we have a Let's Talk page active on this project. If you have comments or questions, please go there. All right, this is going to be a presentation on a whole bunch of random topics today. So some of you may have seen on our Facebook pages, I believe it was on the Police Facebook page last week, just a reminder, everybody out boating, when we get heavy rains, the Cedar River dumps everything, trees, stumps, branches, playhouses into Lake Washington. Marine Patrol, along with Seattle and King County, do their best to pull the floating debris out of the lake. We take it over to a floating debris pen we have near the boat launch. And if you're a homeowner that is on the waterfront and you've got debris on your property that's impacting your dock or your boat, please reach out. Marine Patrol is happy to assist. And it's just a good time to remind you that we still have debris in the lake, so please be safe when you're boating, which means keeping your eyes on the water, boating during the day, and reducing your travel speeds. And thanks to our Marine Patrol for their work on this. Also, in the category of water safety, I'm really pleased to announce the installation of 4 life jacket loaner stations. They will be at the boat launch, Luther Burbank Swim Beach, Groveland Park, and Calkins Landing. This was a project that started almost a year ago. Heather Kurt, who many of you know, local resident volunteer extraordinaire, came forward and said, I want to put these kiosks in, similar to what is at Lake Sammamish State Park. We did our due diligence, worked with our insurance company. They said, yes, here's some criteria. And she was off and running. So we anticipate the kiosks will actually be built by volunteers and installed with the assistance of our staff. The Mercer Island Community Fund awarded a grant to fund the purchase of the life jackets. So thank you to them. We'll have signage on the kiosks talking about how to fit the life vests. And we're publishing some more information on this program in the next recreation guide. So if you're interested in supporting the program by either volunteering or donating, we have our parks email address up there, or certainly feel free to reach out to me. And again, a huge thank you to Heather for taking this and running with this when she saw a need last year. Gallagher Hill crosswalk installation. So work began on a pedestrian crossing improvement earlier this month. It's at the intersection of Southeast 36 and North Mercer Way, so the bottom of Gallagher Hill. This includes a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, a new crosswalk and ADA curb ramps. And we've got one of the ADA, or the rapid flashing beacons shown in that picture there. It's on Island Crestway. 2 travel lanes will remain open during construction, but there are going to be periodic delays. And I emailed the project engineer today and said, hey, let's keep an eye on morning traffic, since we already have traffic backing up off of I-90. So if you have any questions, Antonella Howe is our project manager on that, and I'm sure we'll be pushing out some more information citywide. Recology tour. This is really just a reminder that Recology does offer tours and programs available to the public. It's pretty fascinating stuff. Last Tuesday, actually, a group of city representatives, I think we had 2 council members, Councilmember Anderl and Jacobson, I think, were on the tour. They went to tour the Recology facility, and they got to see how all the various machines are sorting the recycled material and how everything is separated into streams that are baled and then packaged up for third-party buyers. I think probably under council reports, they may talk more about their experience. Councilmember Anderl did come back and give me 5 points on the things I was doing wrong in my recycling at home. So thank you for that. Oh, great. I have some work to do. Council, this is a follow-up, just a little check-in on some work that we started in 2019. You might recall at the mid-year planning session, the City Council asked us to go review athletic field maintenance costs and also look at our interlocal agreements with the school district for shared maintenance. As of this February, just a few weeks ago, we're now tracking our athletic field maintenance activities in CityWorks, which is our GIS-based asset management system. You may recall CityWorks had deployed in the Public Works Department, but it wasn't yet live in Parks. So this is good news, because we'll actually have a preliminary data set in a few months that will inform our athletic field analysis. The other thing I'm excited about, you heard me grumping a little bit about this at our planning session, is we are working on integrating Perfect Mind, which is our scheduling software that we use at the community center, with CityWorks. So this will cut out about 15 staff steps. So when you go and schedule a field and it needs to be lined, or you book a picnic shelter, it will send a work order to CityWorks so maintenance knows about the booking. This was all being done manually. We actually do have some good technology in the city, but it isn't talking to each other. So we're starting to take steps so that the technology talks, and it is really improving efficiency. Back to the athletic field analysis. We expect to be back to you in Q3 with preliminary information. All right, the year-end financial report. I have been asked several times, when will we see this? I am pleased to share that we will be bringing you the preliminary year-end financial report at your council meeting on March 17th. I think we probably could have gotten it done in February, but our staff in finance were pulled to help on another project. So I call this preliminary because we still have other financial reports that we'll be working on through the end of May. They're accounting reports, so the important thing to know is that the cash will mostly be right, except for some fine tuning between now and May. And as we go forward, my goal would be to get our year-end and our quarterly reports to you in a more timely manner. We're also hoping to switch on monthly finance statements to the council. That doesn't mean we'll be coming to you every month, but providing you with a report monthly so that you don't have to wait until the end of the quarter. So our goal is to have that report available to you by the year end. All right, wrapping up with a highlight from last week. Thank you to the over 600 Mercer Islanders who came out last Wednesday to support Mercer Island Youth and Family Services. It was a great breakfast. Preliminary number is that we raised about $450,000. There were additional donations that had not yet been counted. This is about the same as last year, so that's great news. Number of the businesses also came out to help. In fact, they did fundraisers at their own shops, and some of those donations are actually what hasn't been counted yet. There was a song at the beginning, and the Mercer Island Cougar was featured in the song, that cougar that just won't go away. Very creative program, and it was great to see so many faces there. So thank you to the committee that worked on the breakfast. I thought it was a huge success and a lot of fun. And that is my report for this evening.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is appearances. When it's your turn to address the council, please speak audibly into the podium microphone, state your name for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. As a reminder, we ask that comments be addressed to the council as a whole and not to any individual council member. And we ask that the audience refrain from any applause or disapproval of public comments. Deb, do we have people who have signed up?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. We have roughly 9 people currently. We have the first 5 individuals are Joy Matsura, Josh Nope, Dan Seitman, Roberta Lewandowski, and Ted Weinberg.
Welcome.
Joy Matsura, 7264 West Mercer Way. Okay, hello. I'd like to call attention to a problem in our town center and to give the council the opportunity to become heroes. Currently, the town center plan designates only the area north of Southeast 29th as retail. There's no retail requirement for the properties south of 29th. To name just a few, south of 29th, there is the Shell Station, Baskin-Robbins, the Rite Aid lot with Pagliacci's, All the Best, Cascade Frames. There's the Florist. There's Islandia Center with Island Books, Island Cats, Tarabella, and Homegrown. And again, these are just a few. These businesses are vital, thriving, and loved by residents. It was a surprise to me to find that our town center code doesn't place any importance in maintaining these vital retail lots. They're zoned for 3 stories, and that makes these properties at risk for being replaced with tall multifamily buildings that have 0 retail. And you can fix this. At the recent planning meeting, the council agreed to review the town center code, and that's great. Hopefully, you will get it right. However, it's not on the agenda for tonight, and I don't think anyone knows exactly how long the review will take and when the code will be updated. What we do know is that every single day that this zoning error continues, our precious businesses are at risk. So if you are willing to take a few minutes tonight, maybe you're not too busy, you can vote to temporarily add a retail requirement to these lots. Later, when you do your review of the TC code, you can take whatever time you need to be sure of the details so you can make this permanent. You can, of course, choose to wait. If so, you will likely hear from many residents about this. It might only be a few dozen at first, but eventually it will be hundreds. I can guarantee that. And maybe, hopefully, 1,000 people will contact you and ask, when are you going to fix this? And the longer you wait, the more people will know about it and ask about it. And maybe years after you fixed it, they'll hear about it, and then they will ask you, you know. So wherever you go, people will ask, and you can save yourself from this. So I lost it. I had a map with me, and sorry, but I have a map, and it shows a line that you guys can, I have a marker somewhere too, sorry, I'm running out of time. But you can just continue the line around these little areas that I've marked, and you can end up protecting Rite Aid, Islandia, and the other lots. And if you all would really like to, you can become heroes. Yeah,
Thank you.
so that's it.
Thank you.
Sorry to run late. Would anybody like my map?
You can leave it with the city clerk.
Do you need the marker?
Deb,
Yeah.
how you doing?
Good, how are you? So my name is Josh Knopp, 4859 86th Avenue Southeast. So I'm the president of the Citizens for Reasonable Shoreline Policies, an association put together by a number of Mercer Island property owners and businesses with an interest in promoting regulations that benefit both the environment and property owners. I think all but two of you remember from last year, we went through that ordeal of the shoreline policy update, and we provided comments about the separating out the decking replacement versus the structural replacement in that update. So in doing that, in June 18th of last year, we've finished that part of it within here. We approved it as a separate unit, and it's been going to Department of Ecology. Since last June, I've been kind of periodically bugging Evan Maxim, just to kind of see where things are going, and just kind of in case we need to hear more moving forward. And it sounds like we're still slowly putting along. And the way I understood from my recent question to Evan on beginning of February is that we are still, city, still needs to update the cumulative impact analysis that the Department of Ecology was requesting. And after that gets sent to them, and they still have to approve it before we can obviously take effect. And we might have to reword things, it sounds like. My biggest part is to say we are still here waiting for that to be completed. And I know that the Department of Ecology's side of things is not in your guys' hands, but if we can make sure that the city side of it's taken care of and submitted, and you guys can also all help push it along. I know there's a lot of us with projects that we'd like to get in the books and start taking care of our docs. So just, we're still here. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the work that you do on the council, which often includes fielding complaints and concerns from constituents. And I recognize it's a thankless job, sometimes worse, and I'm grateful for what you're willing to do on behalf of the community.
Could you, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
can you state your name?
Dan Sitman, Mercer Island. I'm here to talk about the JCC. I attended preschool at the JCC, and both of my young children attend there today. It's an incredible amenity for the community, for people of all religions, all ages, all income levels. And I know you're considering that tonight. One of the most frequent complaints I hear about the current facility is about traffic, and I don't share those concerns. I drive down Gallagher Hill Road every morning to get to the freeway. I'm rarely delayed by more than a few minutes, and when I am, I observed that most of the traffic is actually caused by people like me, people driving down Gallagher Hill and coming in contact with the traffic light that controls the entrance to I-90. I believe it's I-90 itself that is the real culprit. It's jammed because all of our freeways in our growing region are jammed, and I think it's wrong morally and factually to blame the JCC for a regional problem. I do see a few cars coming from the French-American school, but I don't observe the bulk of the problem originating from that direction. And I do this drive every morning. Now, it's easy to blame outsiders for dropping their kids off at school and causing traffic tie-ups, and it's easy for neighbors to blame the JCC, but I believe it's factually wrong. I also think the French-American School is a great amenity for our community, and while it's true that many of the students come from off-island, many island students are in fact enrolled there. The school's presence enriches Mercer Island by providing more educational opportunities for our families. It also provides tax revenue to support our community, as does the JCC. I should also point out that as islanders, all of us use facilities that are located in other communities, and I don't think it's right for us to be resistant to people coming from elsewhere to access a resource like a school when we ourselves leave the island to do business in other communities. The final point I want to make is that I live very close to the Boys and Girls Club facility called Peak and the new elementary school. We're a block away, and we're very close to the high school. I remember complaints about the Boys and Girls Club facility, and I was not among them. It's true that I face additional occasional traffic delays because of the facility, up to 5 minutes here and there in the morning, but for me, it's a small cost. Just as the Boys and Girls Club and our schools make our community better, so does the JCC. Even if a larger JCC causes some minor inconveniences, and I believe those would be negligible at worst, it's a small price to pay for living in a vibrant, great community like Mercer Island. Please work in good faith with the JCC and the French-American School to help them expand and enhance their facility. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Roberta Lewandowski, and I'm the president of the Mercer Island Sister City Association. We just returned, of 16 Mercer Islanders, just went to Chinon-La-Bain on Lake Lemon, which we call Lake Geneva, and had a cultural exchange with the city officials and a lot of the residents there. And it was so informative and so educational. We went to the sewer plant and as much as we could translate, learned about their issues. I'm so happy Mercer Island doesn't have to run its own sewer plant. But it was very complicated and have the same issues we have with Lake Washington and Puget Sound. We went to the Evian water bottling plant where they talked about their environmental goals of being totally carbon neutral. And some other business we went to, a cultural exchange where we saw French folk dancers who have their songs from being passed down orally from generation to generation, and nothing is written down. So, and I'm glad our historical society is planning to do something like that for us. The other thing about the visit that was nice was they're very formal over there. So there's receptions where everybody's dressed up, and the French people have these banners on, and then there's the presentation of plaques, and the two mayors had to talk, and we were very pleased that Mayor Benson Wong was able to join us for a couple days, and that he was able to speak for the city, and he did a wonderful job representing the city at both formal receptions with humor and grace, and we really appreciate his coming. So we go to Chinon maybe every 10 years, and they come to us every 10 years, but meanwhile, in the meantime, I know you know, we send teenagers over there, or high schoolers, and they send their high schoolers back. So there's a lot of information on how other places in the world run their cities and the amenities they provide. So I just wanted to report on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Ted.
Evening. So in 1956, President Eisenhower launched the program that's currently known as the Sister City Program at a White House conference on citizen diplomacy, where he called it the truest path to an enduring peace. The day on which he said that happened to be September 11th of 1956. In the 63 years that have elapsed since then, that date has become a very vivid reminder of what can result when you don't have intercultural understanding. And in that same time period, 1,800 different sister city relationships have been created between the United States cities and cities in 138 other countries. We are building that path to an enduring peace. This is my first year participating in the delegation, and my only regret was not having done it 5 years ago or 10 years ago. It was a lot of fun. The people of Tonole Band are incredibly generous and very welcoming. Every morning of our 5-day visit, they poured into the lobby of the hotel with this effervescent enthusiasm about the elements of the Tonole Band region and the Otsava region that they were going to be showing us that day. And at the end of our trip, one of their delegates invited our entire delegation over to his house for a fancy dinner, which is a level of conviviality which is actually very rare in France. It's usually reserved for family and for very close friends. So they've really opened up to us over there. And I learned a ton about Tonole Band, about France, about the local government and the culture while I was there. I documented that in a tonal report that I've already emailed to you guys, so I won't drain it here. But some of the things that I did not learn, and I'm already making a list of things I want to do on the next time I go there. I didn't learn that much about décolletage, which is actually the primary economic engine that is driving the growth of the Geneva region. It's actually growing faster than the Puget Sound region. And I didn't get a chance to ride the funicular. I didn't get a chance to go sailing. It's winter. I mean, I want to go there in the summer. I didn't get a chance to go to their music festival or to go on a ferry boat, a ride across the Lake Léman to see Lausanne and Vevey and the other cities in Switzerland, including the Charlie Chaplin Museum. He actually spent the latter half of his life in Switzerland and not by choice. But one of the things that I definitely want to do is you can't go to a town that has the word bath in its name multiple times without actually trying out the baths. I could rhapsodize about the food as well, but I'm running out of time. So I want to close by saying that I hope that the next time we have a delegation that more of you and more of our community can come with us because you definitely will enjoy it and it'll help cement another stone in the path to an enduring peace.
Thank you. Deb? Who do we have next?
Mayor, we have Mr. Ed Weinstein, Mr. Rich Hill, David Fain.
Good evening, council members. My name is Ed Weinstein, and I live at 1655 East Boston Terrace in Seattle. I am an architect currently leading the design of the potential Jewish community campus. We began our campus initiative by meeting with the city's Planning and Development Department approximately 3 years ago. In this meeting, we discussed our observation that the JCC's facilities were non-compliant with some of the development standards of the recently modified single-family code. We anticipated that entitlement of our proposed facility would require a conditional use permit. However, in this meeting, we were introduced to an alternative entitlement strategy, a new community facility zone that would be more appropriate for community facilities located in single-family zones. We were encouraged to utilize this mechanism as it would have application to numerous other clubs, private schools, churches, and synagogues. Not having a preference for either mechanism, we perceived that it would be beneficial to both the city and our organizations to pursue the CFC. All of us have spent significant time and resources to arrive at a point where we collectively determined that the CFC is not politically viable. In response, our organizations are prepared to abandon the CFC and return to the CUP process, which we had originally anticipated. However, in order to utilize the CUP, we require text amendments to create development standards that are more appropriate for institutional uses in single-family zones. Regardless of the mechanism for entitlement, we fully recognize that the realization of our proposed Jewish community campus will involve meaningful public outreach, especially addressing the concerns of our immediate neighbors along Southeast 40th Street. As many of you are aware, we recently hosted an open house with our neighbors that was also attended by 5 council members. We greatly appreciated your attendance at this event. As we presented at that meeting, we believe that we will be able to mitigate all of the tangible impacts of our proposed development, including views of the facility, noise, night lighting, and traffic. For those of you who did not attend the open house, I'm distributing copies of our presentation. As has been understood for the past 50 years, the JCC, Herzl Ner Tamid, and the French American School provide the citizens of Mercer Island with very important cultural, educational, and recreational facilities without any public investment. Specifically, the JCC is open to everyone, and 71% of its members are Mercer Island residents. The realization of our proposed campus will significantly add to the quality of life on Mercer Island and will reduce the demand on its public schools, swimming pool, and community center. In this regard, we strongly encourage you to consider our proposed text amendments and assist us in a timely and robust public process that will allow us to realize these very important community facilities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Rich Hill, and I'm counsel for the JCC, French American School, and Herzl. I've been working for them and with the city for the last 3 years as we've been trying to come up with the best way to move forward on dealing with community facilities issues on Mercer Island. As your staff report pointed out, the stakeholders have recently and timely applied for a zoning code text amendment relating to community facilities on the island. We respectfully ask the council to direct staff and the Planning Commission to review this proposal this year. This proposal applies the lessons that we all have learned from the last 2 years in our extensive community engagement relating to community facilities. The proposal, as opposed to the more general one that had been considered over the last 3 years, this proposal is a narrowly tailored text amendment to the existing zoning code. It proposes only 3 changes to the existing code. 1 to gross floor area provisions, 1 to height, and 1 to lot coverage. No new zoning classification is proposed. No new complex development regulations are proposed. Everything proposed is within your existing single-family zoning code. And the applicability of these changes are very limited. In fact, they're limited to institutions that currently abut commercial zones in your city. Finally, this proposal uses your existing conditional use permit process, again, without creating some new process that was of quite a bit of concern to the community the last go-round. This existing city conditional use permit process guarantees extensive public outreach and consideration before approval of any specific site-specific application. This proposal is consistent with your comprehensive plan. In fact, it implements it. It does not add any new permitted uses to the single-family zone. All of the uses are already allowed pursuant to conditional use permit in the zone. And members of the council, respectfully, it is in the public interest. The island needs renovated and reasonably improved facilities. Because this proposal is so narrowly tailored and streamlined, its consideration should not impose undue burdens on your staff or your planning commission. I'm running out of time, if I may have one more sentence. On your planning commission to consider it. So in this light, we respectfully ask the council at its March 10 meeting to add this issue, this zoning code text amendment, for the 2020 work plan for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. My name is David Fain, 4895 Forest Avenue here on Mercer Island, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the JCC. We moved here as a family 5 years ago because of the community on Mercer Island, and in particular, because of the Jewish community on Mercer Island. And the J is the center of that community here because of its broad reach and its scope and services and the people that it serves. So as a friend and supporter of the J, it has been hard to watch the delay that they have faced the last few years in trying to potentially redevelop their 50-year-old facilities. I understand the city has had the opportunity to use existing tools to allow the facilities, like the SJCC, to propose redevelopment options. A new limited and reasonable zoning approach has been identified. My request, please, do not table or delay council action. Please authorize your staff to review potential zoning changes. The SJCC has been a patient and willing participant in a 2-year city process that has now apparently been abandoned. They deserve timely and respectful consideration by the city. I know that the SJCC wants nothing more than to continue and evolve as a community asset. With over 70% of the SJCC members are here on Mercer Island as residents. Further, the J is privately funded, publicly accessible recreational facility open to all Mercer Island residents. In their recent community open house, they showed a vision that honored neighbors' concerns over height, setbacks, and residential homes, traffic, evening usage, and safety. The JCC simply wants the ability to present this tangible proposal for your consideration. As City Council, you are the ones who, you are the only ones that can give the SJCC the tools they need to do this. Please do the right thing, give the JCC the respect they deserve to find and support a timely solution that allows them to continue to grow and serve our great community. Thank you.
Thank you. Deb, do we have anybody else?
We have two more, Mayor, Ms. Tracy Grumbois and Jane Brom.
Tracy Grumbois, 8440 Southeast 82nd Street. Good evening, council members. I hope you're having a great midwinter break and everyone enjoyed some sunshine today. I am a proud French-American School of Puget Sound parent. My daughter Colette is in her 3rd year there, and my son Hudson will start this September. We are so fortunate to live in a community where we have a bilingual school option and a school that values and focuses on inclusion and diversity. Diversity not only in language and religion, but also in diversity of opinion and thought. This past week, Mercer Island parents at FASP received an email imploring us to ask the council to consider FASP expansion. This email did not include the Planning Commission's recommendation for this area, nor the code amendments submitted by the JCC and FASP. Any lobbying for expansion without knowing exactly what we are asking for is hollow at best. So obviously I did my research and I've read the proposals. This community wants nothing more than for the FASP and JCC to continue to thrive and to expand, but they want that to be legal and in good faith with the neighbors. So on the Planning Commission proposal, I think Shakespeare said it best, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Here, a CFZ by any other name is still a rezone that must follow the proper process and is likely an illegal spot zone. In regards to the proposed amendments by the JCC and FASP, I have 3 main issues. 2 are legal and 1 is neighborly. The first is, I believe this is an illegal spot zone. You heard the attorney for FASP and JCC that it would only affect certain properties. So I challenged the applicants to submit a map of all properties that this would relate to. The second is this is improper process for a rezone. Obviously you know the process for a rezone. You just went through it with CFZ and you are now, I believe, legally required to repeal that by the Growth Management Hearing Board. The third issue I see is these code amendments provide for different rules for commercial nonprofit entities in a residential zone. Different rules for entities that are not by right allowed in a residential zone. That doesn't seem very neighborly to me. I hope that we can work together to find a solution both for JCC and the French American School that benefits this community and also keeps in mind the residents who live there. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane.
Good evening. I'm Jane Meyer Brom, 7420 North Mercer Way. I wasn't planning to speak about the sister city delegation to Thonon-les-Bains, but I couldn't resist. We had a wonderful delegation trip, and I am so appreciative that our mayor was able to come for 2 days. Mayors are very, very important people in France, and so it lent gravitas to our delegation to be led by our mayor. So I'm very appreciative of that. We had a wonderful connection with the people of Thonon there, and a couple of things stand out in my mind. It's been 20 years, and we had the opportunity to see a re-unveiling of a Mercer Island quilt that was presented to the city of Thonon, to the mayor, in 2001, I believe. It has been replaced into a different public building, and there was another kind of re-unveiling of the quilt put together by Terry Pontmeyer, and with the handiwork of 25 Mercer Island women who did different squares, and it was all put together. And it was lovely to see that because it's been hanging in the mayor's office for 20 years. He's stepping down, not running for mayor anymore, so it's been relocated. Another poignant moment for me, which was a surprise, it was an unplanned event. We were all taken up to a hillside just a few kilometers away from Thonon-les-Bains, and it happened to be the site where in 1944, a B-17 that had been shot by Germans came down with 3 engines out and managed to land on this grassy area up in the foothills above Thonon-les-Bains. All 9 crew members survived. They were hurried away from the area by French resistant people, taken across the nearby border to Switzerland and saved. That in that area, the past is not ancient history. Those people are grateful to the U.S. for our role in World War II, and it's a very palpable, very moving thing. There's a chapel there and a display area, and we were thanked literally by the people of the area, and a flag containing 48 stars was taken from one of the beaches was on display there for our impromptu visit. We have such a deep connection with the people of Thonon-les-Bains, and I'm very hopeful that we will continue another 20, 40 years. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Eric Thuot. I'm the head of the French American School of Puget Sound and also a Mercer Island Chamber of Commerce board member. So thank you for letting me speaking today. So I will not talk about the technicality of the zoning code text amendment. I'll let that to experts, and I trust the Planning Commission. I trust the city services. I trust you as a council members to vote and approve the proposals. My area of expertise is education, and so I was born in France, as you can hear. I'm not trying to hide my pronunciation. And I became American a few years ago, so it makes me the perfect French-American person to, be at the helm of the French-American School of Puget Sound. And what I heard earlier makes me very happy, and it's very touching to see the strong ties that exist between Mercer Island and Thonon-les-Bains, between the U.S. and France. And so maybe we don't know, maybe some of us don't know in this room that we are very fortunate to have on Mercer Island the only, tiny white pre-K, as we call them, through grade 8 accredited French-American school in Washington State. So that brings much more than languages. Tracy just said a few words about the values that we have in our school, and also how important it is to provide a bilingual education in today's world. So I would just like to reiterate my thanks to the city for your work with us. And I really want to tell you how motivated we are to have our permanent home on Mercer Island. We've been here for 20 years. This is our 25th anniversary this year. We totally understand, and we want to work further with our neighbors regarding their concerns. We want to be good neighbors. That's, being an educational place, as there is no question about that. So again, thank you so much for considering this proposal of zoning code text amendment. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Well, is there anybody else who wants to address the council? If so, it's time to come down. All right, seeing none, appearances are now closed. The next item on the business is the consent calendar. The consent calendar contains the approval of the accounts payable reports for January 31, 2020, and for February 7, 2020, the approval of the certification of payroll dated February 14, 2020, the approval of the minutes of the February 4, 2020 regular meeting, the approval of Agenda Bill 5662 regarding the right-of-way fleet appropriation of $32,917 from the equipment rental fund to purchase the upgraded hydraulic-driven drop-in sander as part of the previous authorized replacement of FL 0422, which refers to a particular truck. The approval of Agenda Bill 5658, which is the recommended approval of resolution number 1580, appointing Jesse Bond as the city manager and authorizing the mayor to execute the city manager employment agreement that is attached to the packet. Aside from Lisa, Councilmember Andral, does anybody else wish to pull something off the consent calendar? Okay, so Councilmember Andral?
Yeah, I would like to pull AB 5658, the resolution 1580, so that we can discuss as a separate matter of business the appointment of the city manager.
Okay, that will be the first item of regular business. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented?
So moved.
All right, motion was made by Councilmember Neese and seconded by Councilmember Jacobson to approve the consent calendar. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes and the consent calendar is approved. Councilmember Andral, you have pulled AB 5658 from the consent calendar. Do you want to speak to it?
Yes, I think I just wanted to have a chance to express my appreciation to the soon-to-be city manager, not interim, for the work that she's done to date, and to just say how fortunate I feel that we are to be able to retain you, Jesse. And I just wanted you to hear, and I wanted the public to hear at least my vote, and I hope everybody else's vote of confidence in the job that you've done up till now, and the job that we, the very full plate that we've given you for 2020.
Does any other council member want to speak in support, or Jake?
I second what you say, Lisa, and I think we're in good hands. And I, for one, I'm looking forward with considerable anticipation to working with our city manager, who I think has done an excellent job in helping right the ship in the last 9 months or so.
Dave, and then Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, not to pile on here, but Jesse, just on behalf of the community, I want to say thanks for taking on this this role. I think you're a great fit. I joked with you the other day that you still have a couple days if you want to change your mind, but now I think you're down to a couple minutes. But on behalf of the community, we're really appreciative that you're doing this and really look forward to working with you.
Amen. Thank you for everything you've done and everything you're going to do. We really appreciate you and are very grateful to have you.
Craig?
I've been on the wrong side of some 6-1 votes recently. This will not be one of them. I just wanted to say thank you as well. I've been very impressed with your hard work, your communication skills, your passion, your commitment, your creativity, and just about everything else I can think of. I think you're a great asset to the city. It will not be a hard decision.
Councilmember Neese.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think the community has had a good chance to see you in your interim status and what you've done, what you will do, the way that you've done it. I would just say congratulations, welcome aboard. We're really lucky to have you.
I guess I will echo what everybody else has been saying. And even though, I was sad to see City Manager Underwood leave, I'm equally, if not more, excited about the prospect of you now being our permanent city manager. I think we are in good hands, and you've showed great leadership skills, and I'm sure you will use those skills wisely and a lot in order to get us through 2020 and beyond. So we are all excited about finally getting rid of the interim label. Okay, so welcome. And so is there a motion to approve the adoption of resolution number 1580?
Second.
Okay, we had a race to the second. So it was moved by Councilmember Rosenbaum and seconded by Councilmember Jacobson to approve resolution 1580. I say all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And if you say opposed, you will be probably kicked out of this chamber. I don't have that power, but but anyway, motion passes unanimously, passes resolution 1580. Jesse, I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond.
You guys caught me a little speechless. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. After what was probably the longest job interview of my life. No, in all seriousness, you've heard my story. When I came to the city of Mercer Island, I was expecting my daughter Cameron and had decided to go back to my roots and be your parks director. And circumstances changed just a year later, and it's definitely been a journey, but it's been one that I've enjoyed, and I'm humbled and honored to serve as your permanent city manager. We certainly have a full plate. We have for quite some time. It is great to see this council working so good together, and the collaboration with the staff and myself is really, really appreciated. So with that, I say thank you, and to the community, thank you for your grace and your support. There's still a learning curve. I'm haven't been here that long, but finding my way in the city of Mercer Island, and this is a great place to live, and it's a wonderful place to work as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We now move to the next item of regular business, Agenda Bill 5663, Community Facility Code Amendment, Planning Commission Recommendation, Ordinance 20-04, first reading and adoption. Welcome, Community Planning and Development Director Evan Maxim.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. I have a very brief presentation this evening, brief review of the Planning Commission's recommendation to you, describing our next steps both for this evening and for March 10th, and then reminding the Council of the recommended motion for this evening. So the City Council will recall that in August of 2019, you directed the Planning Commission to develop a problem statement related to the community facilities zone discussion. This is captured in your packet Exhibit 1 on page 4. Planning Commission did evaluate 4 different alternative approaches as directed by the City Council. Those 4 alternative approaches are described in, again, Exhibit 1, pages 5 through 11. In the end, the Planning Commission formed a 3-part recommendation to you. The first part of that recommendation was to discontinue the current community facility zone discussion and process. This is represented as alternative number 4 in the Planning Commission material in Exhibit 1. The second part of that recommendation was to consider a code amendment, a new discussion around the conditional use permit criteria and process, including some changes to the development standards. And then at some later date, as Part C, resume the discussion around a rezone. And this, of course, is explained in more detail in your packet for this evening. For tonight, my recommendation to the City Council is really that we complete Part A of the Planning Commission's recommendation, which is to adopt ordinance number 20-04, repealing portions of the 2018 Comprehensive Plan amendments. This will require that you suspend one of your rules of procedure. For March 10th, I'm anticipating that the City Council will provide direction to staff, unless you do so tonight, around pursuing either Part B of the Planning Commission's recommendation, which again is a fairly limited scope code amendment, or taking up the proposed code amendment that you've heard discussed in public comment tonight, turned in by the JCC and French American School. And with that, I'll put the motion up onto the screen that I've recommended in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Does anybody have any questions regarding the first? Jake?
Well, I believe this action will also bring us into compliance with the direction from the Growth Management Hearings Board, will it not?
I believe that's correct.
And has there been a map that reflects what the world will look like once we've acted on this motion?
So in your packet, you have ordinance 20-04, which includes, I believe, 2 attachments. Moving off memory at the moment, but I believe attachment B is an updated map, okay, which I see Councilmember Neese has in hand. That reflects a change back to the land use designation that was in effect prior to the 2018 Comprehensive Plan amendments.
Thank you. Don't know how I missed it.
Any other questions or comments for Evan at this point? The recommendation, seeing none, the recommendation is to suspend City Council Rule of Procedure 6.3, requiring a second reading for this ordinance.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion has been made by Deputy Mayor Weicker and seconded by Councilmember Anderall. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? This motion passes. Now, the next one is, you want to continue on, Deputy Mayor, with the
I move
follow-up?
that we adopt ordinance number 20-04 to repeal portions of the 2018 Comprehensive Plan amendments related to the community facility zone.
Second?
Second.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so motion's been made by Deputy Mayor Weicker and seconded by Councilmember Reynolds. All those in favor of this adoption of this ordinance, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Now, Evan, I guess you were, aside from this particular item, if you scroll back, yeah, so you wanted some direction possibly regarding March 10? Excuse me. I'm sorry. Can you just go back and sort of elaborate what direction you are seeking?
Of course, Mayor. So on March 10th, my intent is to request City Council direction around at least one of the 2 code amendment options that we have on the table described in your packet tonight. One of those options is the Planning Commission's recommended approach, which is captured as Part B in your agenda bill. Remind the City Council that this involves both a change to the criteria for a conditional use permit approval and amending the development standards related to gross floor area and height. The Planning Commission did not provide you with a specific change beyond that. The alternative approach, and these would be likely mutually exclusive, would be for the City Council to direct staff and the Planning Commission to review the French American School and JCC Code Amendment. This has some very specific language. I believe the City Council has seen the highlighted version of that draft code amendment. I highlighted the portions of the code amendment in one of my email transmissions to you last week. This has some very specific text language. My intent for March 10th is to provide a little bit of a contrast for the City Council to provide direction, unless you can make that or provide that direction this evening.
Is there any discussion or questions, or, again, Councilman?
I would just like to weigh in and say that I would like to hear a more developed statement from staff on March 10th before we provide direction. I feel like this was not specifically an agenda item for tonight, and so I think it'd be premature to weigh in on it.
Yeah, and again, the staff is just looking for direction, so.
Right, but
in terms of things that they might want, that the council might want the staff to review. So I guess one question I heard from Evan is simply whether or not we want to direct staff to take a look at the actual code amendment that was proposed. Separate from that is whether or not we want the council to possibly consider alternative B as proposed by the by the Planning Commission.
Well, okay, not right now.
Jake, and then.
I think at that time, it would be helpful to me anyway to have an idea of what impact consideration of the proposed code amendment would have on the items already scheduled as part of the work plan by the City Council for your department, Evan.
Celine?
So one of the things, because I was on the council, as many of you were, when the CFZ came around, is we were told that this was going to be the solution to this problem, and it turned out to be a problem in and of itself. One that got us in legal jeopardy and that we just unwound tonight. I'm wondering if we shouldn't, between now and March 10th, take a little bit of time to do a postmortem on what happened there and make sure, that since there are three paths forward, that none of those paths end up in this place again, that we don't have any exposure to legal jeopardy, that whatever process we embark on is one that isn't fraught with those types of perils. The last thing I want to see this council do is spend another 2 years going down a road that just gets unwound in a single evening. And I'm sure the JCC would appreciate the same thoughtfulness. So that's what I would hope that we have for March 10th.
Yeah, I'd second that.
Any other comments, or is there, I'm trying to see if there's, Deputy Mayor.
So definitely consensus, wholeheartedly agree with Salim on that. So I'd like to see some specifics and in particular address some of the issues that Tracy raised and how those relate to the comments that Rich made. So there's absolutely no confusion or suspicion around who's doing what and what this all means. So if you could have that agenda bill be crystal clear on the legal front, on the land use front, on the risks and opportunities, and I think it's high time we figure out what can be done on that property and what the impacts are. And I hear all sides saying we need to work together and mitigate the impacts, honor the neighbors, honor the growth in the region, honor this asset that we have in this community. So as specific as you can get to help us move this along per Salim's comments, really would appreciate that.
I'm going to break this up in two because I've heard Evan ask for direction, and I want to make sure we give clear direction, as clear as possible, as best as the council you can usually do. Are we directing the staff to review the code amendment application to come back on March 10th? Is that kind of a thumbs up? I mean, I guess.
Is that enough time for staff to do that?
Is it, well, good question. Evan?
I believe we can provide at least a high-level review by March 10th. Recall, City Council, the question really on March 10th is whether you initiate the code amendment process. You're not deciding on the amendment itself.
Okay.
That amendment would need to go back to the Planning Commission, go through the public hearing process, And the Planning Commission would need to recommend a change to you before you could actually amend the development code. So really the question for March 10th is high level, what policy approach do you want to use? The Planning Commission's recommended approach, the JCC's more specific but still recommended approach, or some other alternative.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. So there's that, and then there's also the high-level review of Part B that was presented by the Planning Commission. Are people inclined to also include that as the high-level review by staff for March 10? Craig?
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing, because I'm hearing people saying what I think are different things. I would have been prepared, I believe, I'm certainly not prepared yet to support a code amendment or any particular solution at all, but I would have been prepared now to direct the Planning Commission to start looking at it. And I think that might be what you were suggesting, whereas I thought what Evan was asking for, and maybe what Lisa and Salim were saying, was on March 10th, decide whether to direct the Planning Commission to look at it or not. And I just want to clarify what we're discussing here.
Mayor, if I might clarify. The Planning Commission's recommendation and the J's code amendment application are effectively two different approaches. I would advise the City Council, when you complete your discussion on March 10th, to be clear which approach you would like the Planning Commission to engage in. And I would encourage the City Council to be as clear as possible as to the policy basis for that recommendation on any approach, if one of these two, or including these two. The reason for that, of course, is I am concerned that we may end up in a similar situation as to the one we've just exited. And I'm happy to address the legal questions that Councilmember Neese raised and several council members echoed to help you in that evaluation on March 10th. For March 10th itself, again, my intent at the moment is to provide you with information about both options. I believe the mayor was, and I don't want to speak for the mayor, but as I understood his question, it was whether we should evaluate the Planning Commission's recommended approach further for March 10th or simply evaluate the French American School approach. Did I get that accurate, Mr. Mayor, or did I put words in your mouth?
No, you accurate and better said than I. So the question is there a general feeling as far as the direction we give to staff? Do we want them to come back with a very high level? Again, we're not making any decisions on on 10, but they're come back on March 10 with a high-level review of the code amendment application process, and then also whether or not we want to include Part B. So can we just, let's separate this in two. Okay, so do we want to give direction to the staff to come back, high-level evaluation regarding the code amendment application? Is there a thumbs up, general, thumbs up? Okay, it looks like,
I guess
okay.
we have to evaluate.
Yeah,
you know.
exactly, we're not gonna.
Not making any decisions.
No, absolutely not, we're just giving them direction. So that's, okay, so you have that. Now what about Part B? Do you want to give them, the staff, direction to evaluate on a high level this process entitled Part B by the Planning Commission? Oh, go ahead, Dave.
Evan, I imagine a lot of the sort of work that you would do on Part B is actually already done through the work in the Planning Commission. Is that fair? In terms of what you'd put together for us?
Generally, that would be accurate,
'Cause
yes.
I think it'd be helpful to sort of have side by side to sort of understand what the options are in terms of those two options.
Okay. Any other comments? Jake?
I, for one, would like to get a read from our city attorney about what the various paths are and what we can legally do. We've just gotten smacked by the Growth Hearings Board for not following procedures. And we look back now, we wasted roughly 2 years and a whole ton of time for the planning department as well as all of us. So I'd like to, and I will address my specific concerns to the city attorney about that to get an answer so that we understand that going in, so that we don't put ourselves down a path that's going to end up in a train wreck.
Well, I will agree with you on, I think, again, you and some other Councilmember Neese and Deputy Weicker, I think we all are concerned about making sure that the analysis or decision-making process includes a number of factors, including legal risk. And so I think that's all going to be part of the decision-making process. at least at this point, the question is whether or not we want to direct staff on a high level to look at Part B. And to Councilmember Rosenbaum's point, so that we can do a side-by-side review. So do we have a thumbs up, or is there?
So I think I have a clarifying question. I guess I'm not clear where Part B is, how it's related to the language that the J has submitted. So, and I don't think our public has seen that because it just came through email, right? So I think I'd like a little more clarity on how the Part B is different or consistent or in sync with the language that Jay is putting forward, right? Like I'm still not clear on if those are so separate or so aligned, or if we're talking, specifics. If the Planning Commission is going to talk specifics, I just don't get how those two are connected and how it's consistent with legal procedure. And I need a little more information. I'm pretty sure our public does too.
A question on that too.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor, to be direct, it sounds like a differential between the two amendments for March 10th may allow us to make this, may allow the City Council to provide this direction. The differential you just described, I can verbally describe to you tonight, but I don't know that I would do it justice and bring everybody along in a verbal description, and I can certainly queue this up in the packet. In short, I will take a shot at the verbal description now. In short, the French American School JCC proposal amends specific development standards in the residential zoning designation, single-family residential zoning designation. It does not amend the process or the criteria for a conditional use permit. The Planning Commission's recommendation amends the criteria for a conditional use permit and a narrower set of development standards. So, by way of comparison, the Planning Commission has recommended that you modify the gross floor area limits and the height limits. The J and French American School application modifies the height limits, the gross floor area limits, and the lot coverage limits. And there are nuances here I am not doing justice to, and I would happily describe those to you as needed.
Yeah, I like I said, I guess my concern is echoing what Salim and Jake have said, and maybe they've hammered it home sufficiently. But honestly, I think we need specific information on, or before the March 10th meeting, as to whether the proposed code amendment is vulnerable as an illegal spot zone. And also very specific legal guidance as to whether this is a rezone or not, whether the proper process is being followed, and whether we need an amendment to the comprehensive plan along with this proposed text amendment. I've seen emails that say we don't think one's necessary, but I haven't seen any analysis around that.
So the question I have is since this was an application for a zoning text amendment and it was submitted with a fee, and if it's a complete application, isn't it incumbent on us to review it? Do we have a choice to not review a complete application?
So, City Council, this is not a project review, which has, under state law, certain requirements that you take action on it. This is a legislative decision. There was an application, there was a fee paid. That fee is a deposit against, it's a fee that's intended to cover staff time. I would advise the City Council, you do need to decide whether or not to move forward in your legislative review or not. But I do not believe you have to go through the full review process, meaning send it to Planning Commission, have the public hearing, have a recommendation back to the City Council, and then take action by a motion or ordinance at that time. That is the purpose of the March 10th conversation, actually, is to ensure that we do not send this to Planning Commission if there's no appetite to adopt a code amendment.
Any other comments, or Jake?
Well, along the lines of a prior comment of mine, I'd like to know what's on the Planning Commission's agenda to support the work items that we established back in January, because there is not an infinite capacity to deal with these kinds of things. And so when we make decisions, we have to make decisions like this on what's the priority of the application of the volunteer resources of the city, planning commission, design commission, what have you, and the staff. So I'm, for one, would like to hear about the planning commission's impact and its workload.
Okay. Again, any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I'm just trying to get an idea whether or not we want to direct the staff on a high level to look at Part B. Can I get a thumbs up, thumbs down? I see 4, anyway, 5, so you have that direction. Evan, do you need any further direction at this time, or do you have enough, I guess, to go forward to March 10?
I have sufficient direction. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. I see. All right, I was going to see if people wanted to take a break, but I see the city clerk running or hobbling to the...
I dance too.
Or dancing too.
That's
So we now move to the next item of regular business, Agenda Bill 5665, City Council Rules of Procedure Amendments. And we welcome the city clerk, Deb Estrada.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Let me just bring this up. Mayor, City Council, my name is Deborah Estrada. I'm your city clerk. Just a review of where we've been with the rules of procedure. City Council provided direction to amend the rules of procedure at the planning session on January 24. The first round of revisions were presented to the City Council on February 4th, and then all the amendments were approved except for your board and commission process. City Council asked staff to include specific details of the voting procedures, which we believe we have done. Since the packet was released, however, City Council members have made several additional changes which are detailed in the following slides, and you should all have a copy of that on your desk as well. There were a number of Scrivener minor errors that we addressed, primarily things like changing boards and commissions to lowercase to be consistent throughout the document. We changed all versions of council to city council throughout the document, again, for consistency. And we removed the reference to assistant to the city manager from Appendix D because, well, we don't have an assistant to the city manager anymore. And then there were a total of 5 rules recommended amendments since the packet went out. Each of those items at this point require confirmation from council that this is how you'd like to proceed. Again, you have copies of all of this in front of you in more detail, or at least bold and in color in front of you on the screen. The first one is to change the wording based on to equal to, made by Councilmember Reynolds, and then the last piece was recommended by Councilmember Anderall to be more clear that it's 1 for each seat, or 1 vote for each seat.
So, yeah, I think unless somebody wants to speak to these, or they seem to be relatively straightforward. So I'm getting a nod from Councilmember Neese to think maybe we just give thumbs up, thumbs down, unless somebody has an issue. So.
I think that would work.
Okay, and this one, everybody's okay? Jay, okay, so that one's good, thank you.
All right. The next one, again, you have it in front of you, is in addition to 8.12, section E3, or subsection E3. Is there a thumbs up or thumbs down on that?
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, I gotta make sure I think
The second amendment?
Yeah, that was fine. Yep, I'm sorry, it didn't matter, okay. So we're good.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Sorry, you guys are just too fast.
And then your third amendment, we have 5 in total.
Anybody have
And
any
again, this is
questions
about
this one?
clarifying.
Good clarifications.
Good, okay. We
Everyone's
got
good?
4, yep,
Great.
Okay.
Fingers crossed, we'll keep moving forward. Number 4.
see, 1, 2, okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it's good, okay, we're good.
Thank you. And then the fifth amendment is, this is something I came across. We could probably continue to find little things as we look at it, but it's regarding public censure, to clarify. It was an incomplete sentence, so we cleaned that up. And unless you want to do something different than what we're proposing here.
Okay, I'm sorry, maybe we haven't seen this one.
So this was not recommended by council. This is something that I discovered today when I was making the proposed amendments that council put forward. The first sentence was just an incomplete sentence, so we cleaned it up, cleaned up the language.
Okay, does anybody have any issues? Okay.
That's okay.
I think we're good, okay?
That's all that I have, council. The recommended motion is to approve the resolution number 1579, amending the city council rules of procedure as amended.
Do we have? Okay, so the motion has been made by Councilmember Jacobson and approved, seconded by Councilmember Neese. All those in favor of approving resolution 1579, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much for, I appreciate the effort in getting this before us as a PowerPoint, and I certainly appreciate all the city council folks for getting their comments to staff in a timely manner so that these changes could be made. It's a lot better to do it this way than having everybody do it from their seat, so.
No, I think it was a very helpful process, and it was certainly a good lesson in consistency.
Yes.
I think that the effort that our city clerk has done reflects excellent precision and care in what she has done, and not only on this subject, but on other ones where some people like me are stuck on stupid. And I for one, really think that her performance on this business and my interaction has been, reflects a very superior performance on her part, and I'd like to make that part of the record.
Thank you.
Thank you. There have been a lot of individuals working on this. Your city manager and I have spent many hours working on this and consulted a number of individuals, so I'm glad that we were able to land this tonight.
Great, well, you're still up, I guess, so we now move to the next, oh, I'm sorry.
I hesitate to bring this up, but I'm going to anyway. We did a lot of work to get this right and make some unambiguous rules. I'm just going to make the observation that the section on appointing members of council to fill vacant seats on the council could stand to use have the same rules apply to them, and I wonder if it's worth asking the staff to consider suggesting comparable changes there. Because those rules suffer from the same ambiguity and uncertainty as to how to resolve ties and how to eliminate minority vote getters, et cetera.
Nobody's going anywhere, though.
Hopefully not. So we could certainly defer that until
Yeah.
we have a vacancy, but I hope we don't have to have the discussion during a voting process.
Yeah, I just am cognizant
yeah,
of staff time, resources.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay, yeah, I think I would probably defer as well.
Okay.
So, okay.
That's something that if council wants to, when and if that does happen, we can address it at that time.
That I'm very comfortable with that. Let's make sure we do before we start counting fingers.
All right. All right, so now we move to the next item of regular business, Agenda Bill 5666, Boards and Commissions Code Amendments.
This is very simple, council. This is more of a cleanup of your ordinance based on the action that you just took. So this is simply a process change to allow board and commission selections to be made by a vote of the full council. And it codifies the appointment process identified in the city council rules of procedure. So the recommended motion tonight is to simply adopt the ordinance number 20C-02, amending the membership appointment process.
Well, is there a motion to adopt ordinance number 20C-02? Councilmember Neese, is there a second? Councilmember Rosenbaum. Okay, so the motion has been made by Councilmember Neese and seconded by Councilmember Rosenbaum. All in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes 7-0. Now, I did note in the agenda bill, there was a request or a question that staff to ask the city council if it wants the staff to pursue possible changes to the appointment process of the Open Space Conservancy Trust. Did I read that correctly? So, city manager?
There are just a couple of additional steps to make a similar change, including starting first by engaging the Open Space Conservancy Trusts, which we have not done yet. We've been working on this, but we are happy to do so if that is your pleasure. If the appointment process is not modified, it will continue in its current form, which is the mayor and deputy mayor providing a recommendation to the council for board appointment.
Well, to be consistent with our recent change, it would make sense to me to start that process. I don't know, does anybody have a concern, or Councilmember Anderall, you're the liaison?
Yes, I have not liaised yet, though.
Okay.
So I guess I would like to know a little bit more about whether there's anything about the trust as a legal entity that would make it sufficiently different from the councils and commissions and boards, or if it is just a separate animal that just needs a separate process, but there would be no reason to not be consistent. So, I mean, maybe I can look into that myself.
It is a sufficiently different animal, although I believe the appointment process you just identified is perfectly appropriate for the Open Space Conservancy Trust. We just didn't take that step yet. That is something that, with your head nods this evening, I will ask our city clerk to start working on next.
Do we have a head nod to pursue that?
Let's clean it all up, I guess, if it's not, hopefully not a lot of work.
I see a couple of them. Okay, you have that direction.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. We
And
now move, I think we've,
I just wanted to explain one more thing
Yes.
before we closed
Yes.
and went to the next item. And that is that this ordinance will be published next Wednesday on the 26th. It will go into effect prior to your March 10th meeting, so that the plan at this point is to hopefully bring this back to you at the March 10th meeting to make these appointments and move forward with filling the vacancies. And then we'll turn around and we'll go into the annual
okay.
appointment process.
So we've already been provided copies of all the applications, and so I just encourage all the city council folks to take a look, and so to be ready to come back on March 10.
I think, yes, and I think to be helpful, I will make a point of sending those out to you yet again tomorrow so that I know things get lost in the email, and it's been a while since you received those.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Now I move to the final item of regular business. It's Agenda Bill 5667, City Council Letter of Support, East Channel Required Navigation Procedures, Arrivals and Departures. Councilmember Neese, do you want to lead this discussion?
Happy to. So I serve as the voting member of the Renton Airport Advisory Commission, which is advisory as the airport body to the Renton City Council. And the Renton Airport has a couple of things that are going on. One is a reclassification by the FAA, which would, if their master planning process proceeds, make some changes to the runway configuration in terms of adding extra length to the runway to accommodate safety requirements, maybe some increased bizjet commercial traffic into Renton Field. One of the things that we've heard pretty consistently from South End residents is complaints about aircraft flights down the existing arrival approach into Renton, which is largely over Island Crest Way. They're flying anywhere from 500 feet, 600 feet in good or bad weather into Renton. It's typically not a real big issue for a little Cessna or a small prop plane, but the turbines, the citations, the Learjets, any of the business jet type traffic that's coming in that is more flowing into Renton because Seattle is getting busier and busier, is creating a lot of noise and safety issues. And so in the past, Boeing, who is the large tenant of Renton Airport, had established a procedure working with the FAA called the RMP procedure. This required navigation performance procedure has flights leaving Renton and approaching Renton over the East Channel. And that's been in use for many, many years and for very safe flight operations. In terms of the letter, what we're asking we're effectively supporting Renton's Airport's ask of FAA. The FAA go and re-implement the RMP procedures. Boeing implemented them with FAA. FAA said, these are great, these are safe, we should be doing this. Nationally, they went and did RMP procedures, and they never got around to reissuing them. So it's incumbent on FAA to do this work. We're just simply asking the FAA reprioritize it.
Quick question?
yes.
Oh, sorry. There was a copy of the agenda bill at my desk, but there was also one in the packet. Are they different?
I don't believe so, Councilmember Anderl. I'm not sure why
I think
that,
you're an outlier on that. I don't have an extra copy.
I'm not sure why that's
So
there.
there's an agenda bill for this item. There is a copy of the letter on your desk that's referring to the proxy that will be addressed under other business.
Right, okay, no, that's something different.
Two
This is
separate-
This agenda bill must have just gotten into my packet and an extra copy found its way on
I
my desk.
suspect it was because your packet was still there by the time that was ready, and so you're one of the two council members who received a copy actually in your packet, whereas other council members did not.
Okay. Tactful way of saying I picked mine up late. But thank you. No, that's fine. That's great.
So I authorize the mayor to sign a letter recommending FAA take the necessary steps to propose upgrading the priority for required navigation performance procedures for Renton Airport as priority 1. And I thank Salim for his work on this issue.
I second.
So moved
Give
by,
it to Anderl.
moved by the deputy mayor and seconded by Councilmember Anderall. All those in favor say aye. Oh, I'm sorry, my apologies. Yes, yes.
More discussion?
Yes, I'm sorry.
And this is just a question of clarification. Right now, from what I understand, there's a path that goes, there's a path that goes essentially over Island Crest Way at the south end of the island, and you're proposing going over the East Channel instead, but the East Channel at its narrow point is only a couple hundred yards wide or something like that. Do the airlines really thread the needle that closely in this alternative configuration?
So there are no airlines, right? There's no
jets,
commercial
excuse me,
traffic.
yeah.
Remember, RMP is only for aircraft equipment that can fly this type of navigation procedure. So it's not for the Cessnas. It's not for the very small aircraft. It's for the ones that are flying in any conditions and no visibility conditions on instrument flight courses. The width of the East Channel is at that height. By the time they get to the East Channel is irrelevant. If you look at this page of your agenda bill, it shows the RMP procedure, and it has them flying out of Renton Field, coming straight, gaining altitude, banking to the right, heading to the East Channel Bridge, and then taking a beeline out to Woodinville. That's a procedure that's already in place and already been used. It's a very, very safe procedure. It's been used by all of the first flights, the B-1s, the A-1 flights out of Boeing. So these are the riskiest flights, right? These are aircraft that have never flown before flying this procedure. FAA never did make an arrival RMP procedure. So when I say an aircraft is following Island Crest Way into Renton, that's something the FAA needs to build. They've never built that. Boeing never built it. They only did the departure because they build 737s and they leave. So I don't think that this is something that is going to put anybody at risk. The FAA wouldn't allow that.
I wasn't so much thinking about risk as much as just naively, and this is a topic in which you are far more informed than I, it seems like a policy change like this would make life better for people that live in the center part of the island, but would make it worse for people that live on the east side of the island from a noise perspective. Would it not?
No, because largely it's already being flown. What it's doing is it's memorializing a very safe and certified FAA course for very specifically equipped aircraft. So it's probably a very small percentage of the flight equipment that's leaving there. It's the equipment that creates the biggest risk if there was a crash, right? You wouldn't want that amount of fuel coming down on the island. You would rather that go into the lake.
And just to provide more context to this, Renton Airport Advisory Council is 25 aviation experts and mechanics and operations and people who know this work and know these airplanes and know this system. And the advisory board reviews this for a very long time and operates to best standards. So Salim being there for us we get to say and have some input into that process, but there are a lot of operational requirements that that group is tasked with implementing.
And I'll add that this is supportive of what the Renton Airport manager is already trying to do, right? This is not Mercer Island requesting they do something that they're not embarked on. It's just a way to give them a little bit more leverage with FAA to get the priority status changed.
Thank you. Any other questions? I apologize, Craig. I'll look around next time. Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you, Celine. Now we actually move to other business and planning schedule. So permanent city manager, Jesse Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will admit, one of the downsides to getting your packets out a day earlier is as soon as we send it out, we have a change to the planning schedule. And there will be an easier way to do this eventually, which will probably look something like posting this on our website, so it's just turned on and always visible. In the meantime, I believe you have hard copies in front of you of the revised planning schedule. So I will point out a couple things. A reminder, the March 3rd meeting is canceled and was rescheduled to March 10th, which is now a special meeting. We will start that evening at 5:30 with an executive session. We have added, under regular business, we simply called it a placeholder, but it's to discuss follow-up discussion from tonight on the code amendment and Part B of the Planning Commission recommendation from the Community Facilities Zone discussion. So you'll see that there. And as Deb mentioned, we're going to do your board and commission appointments that evening. We have a number of vacancies to fill. Looking ahead to March 17th, I want to point out this is one of those meetings where I need to ask for your permission and forgiveness to start at 5 o'clock. We have a 90-minute joint meeting with the Parks and Recreation Commission, and this is the kickoff meeting for the PROS plan. So I will anticipate you'll be talking about what a PROS plan is, and this will be your opportunity to provide direction to the Parks and Recreation Commission as they commence their work. We will have dinner that evening. Probably nothing else. Fairly loaded agenda that evening. And then I think that is probably all I need to cover. I will be gone. Just as soon as you appoint me city manager, I take a vacation. So April 7th, I will be out of town, and either Ally or Jason will be acting city manager that night. And I think that is it from me.
Thank you. You're giving us enough lead time for those who have to schedule our work around that. So, 5 o'clock is an early start, but hopefully people can make accommodations at their place of employment. Okay. So we do have some other business before we get to council member reports. I'm going to turn this over to Councilmember Neese regarding the RAAC proxy question.
Yeah, so Council, we have a letter in the packet dated February 18. This is being prepared at the request of the Renton Airport Advisory Committee. And the meetings that occur for the Renton Airport Advisory Committee coincide very often with our Tuesday night meetings. And so in my absence, Mercer Island resident Captain Tom Emmerich, who's a retired Boeing experimental test pilot, he's a retired FAA administration official. We're very lucky to have him helping us with this, but he has been attending the meetings in my absence, consulting with me, and if there is a vote required, he's been submitting the will of Mercer Island on my behalf, on our behalf. Most of the time it's attend, listen, take notes, come back. I first want to thank him for his service to Mercer Island. He's a huge, huge asset. I've learned a lot, Mercer Island, and I think the advisory council has learned a lot with his presence. They are truly appreciative of his attendance in my absence, but the letter is to effectively say that if we have a conflict that he as my proxy could submit a vote. So we're just looking for council support that the mayor could sign this letter directing the advisory council to accept that proxy vote.
That sounds great to me.
Can we have a little discussion?
Yeah, sure.
Go
Well, we were. That was my discussion.
Go ahead.
Totally appreciate Tom being there when you can't be there. I just am a little bit concerned about council members assigning friends to be their proxy. So I think we should have a conversation about how and when that happens and maybe think about it for our process going forward. So I'm happy to have Tom do this. I want this letter to be signed. I think he's an expert in this field and appreciate his service and know that that group gets very technical and his expertise in that area is much appreciated. And I'm sure adds a lot to the discussion, but I think it would have been nice to know ahead of time about the proxy. And Jesse's now stepped out of the room.
Well, perhaps the city attorney can address the issue of, I haven't seen this before, so if you can just elaborate on whether or not there's any issues with having a proxy. And again, I appreciate his willingness to serve, and obviously he has the expertise.
Right. I've looked at this, and from a legal perspective, there's no prerequisites for the city council to appoint one of its own or a city employee as a proxy to represent the council and the council member who cannot be present at the meeting. So I have no concerns about this. As far as what the process is and how that's done, that's at the discretion of the city council.
Any other? Go ahead.
Are there any other boards or commissions like this? I mean, this is sort of a unique one anyway.
Right.
Right, because we moved the meetings, right, so.
See, so what I looked at is whether a council member representing the council body at a meeting of this type with a different organization, that whether that be the Sound Cities associations or environmental groups, right? Whether that appointment requires a secondary or alternate member of the city council, or it can be appointed to somebody, whether that person be a resident, whether that person be somebody in the industry who's knowledgeable about it, that the city council has, that the city council trusts, and there is no prerequisite basically. So appointing Captain Thomas Emmerich as Councilmember Nice's proxy at this group's meeting, and it'd be completely legal for the city council to do so. I have no legal concerns. It seems like what Deputy Mayor Weicker is saying is that do we have to have a process in place, and whether the city council would like to have that process in place or not is at the discretion of the city council. You can have it, or you can go like what you've been doing right now.
Okay, so to follow up then, I'd like to proceed with this letter, and then in the future have some conversation when proxies are going to be used, whether it's for SCA or K4C or whatever. If there's going to be a regular person attending and speaking on behalf of the city, I think the full council should know about it ahead of time, certainly if it's going to be a regular thing. So, open for discussion.
Well, I agree that each proxy appointment should be done on a case-by-case basis. And I don't think we're being asked to approve this, right? Or did it go out already? Yeah, okay, so I think this is our opportunity to consider it, and I think that's fair. But yeah, I think it just does have to be done on a case-by-case basis, and I'm comfortable with this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, again, this is the first time I've seen this, and so, as far as the use of a proxy, and I think, based upon what Councilmember Nice said, he's intimately involved in this, so there's nothing in terms of any type of vote. It appears that you guys are talking, and so I don't have an issue with this one. I will say, though, I think your point's well taken, that if this becomes more of a regular issue, and I don't think it will, I think this is more of a one-off, then yeah, we probably do need to have a policy. But it's good to raise the questions, but until we actually see more and more of this come forward, I'm not sure if we need to adopt a formal policy at this point. But it's good to take note. I'm sure the city attorney is doing that right now, so.
As long as nobody's trying to appoint a proxy for their position on city council, I think we'll be fine.
So, any other comment? Oh, yes, I'm going to look that way now. Oh, yes.
Thank you. I need to be taller. Just to follow up on what Councilmember Weicker said, I thought that what I heard Councilmember Neese say, and I may have misheard, was that Captain Emmerich had already been acting as your proxy. And if that's correct, that was the part that concerned me a little bit. I'm totally comfortable with us agreeing that he should be your proxy going forward, but if he's been doing it already, that's something we should probably have a meeting in the mind that should come to the council first before that happens.
Okay.
I mean, I think we already had that. He has not submitted a vote that has been recognized by the RAC, so he has not been a proxy. He has attended a meeting in my absence. So what we're doing is formalizing the ability to submit a vote on my behalf.
Okay, I'm totally supportive
Every
of
other
that.
prior vote has been cast by email directly, right? So he's not proxy to vote.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, do we have a motion to, do we need a motion? Is that? Okay, so motion authorizing me to sign this letter has been made by Councilmember Jacobson and seconded by Deputy Mayor Weicker. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? This motion passes 7-0. So we now move, oh, well, first of all, council member absences. So do we have any?
I will not be here on March 17th.
Just taking the schedule out through April, I don't see anything. I can't really go further than that.
Okay. Anybody else? Everybody's in town? Okay. Deb, you have that, you made those notations? Okay, great. We now go to council member reports. And so I'm going to start, Craig, do you have anything to report?
Other than the fact that I attended the YFS breakfast for the first half of it before having to fly out of town, I thought it was a fabulous event. Congratulations to everybody involved in putting it on.
Okay, great. Dave?
Wishing best of luck to the high school boys basketball team. They're playing right now out in, I believe it's in Bellevue College, it's the first round of the King County tournament. So I was at the game against Bellevue a few weeks ago, and it was awesome. They won the last minute and a half or so go on my.
Okay, all right. Lisa?
I have kind of a long one.
Yes.
But this is my little geek out on the visit to Recology, which was so great. I mean,
Now, the city manager's not here to get her 6 points.
I've already told her. I've already told her what I think she's doing wrong. It's what a lot of us are doing wrong because some of the processes have changed, in the changeover, and I think a lot of people still think that they can, if they bag their plastic bags, that's okay. That's not. No film. Period. End of story. It screws up the equipment. That it is better for their sorting equipment if you don't crush your aluminum cans. I know that's not what we heard in growing up, and they used to sell can crushers and everything else, but the process is different now. So plastic bottles, like water bottles, like the Perrier bottle that Salim's drinking out of, you can recycle the bottle and cap as long as they are both plastic and as long as they're connected to each other. The little caps get lost in the processing otherwise, but
We have a demonstration going on right now.
so this gets better though. This gets better. I'm telling you right now. So one of the really positive things that we see, I think, is they said that only about 10% of the recycling material is dirty. In other words, needs to be taken out as garbage. But the real room for improvement is we've got like 60% recyclable stuff still in the garbage. So lots of opportunity and headroom there to reduce the waste stream through education. And as they get their feet under them, as being a part of this community, they're going to be, at the farmers markets and at schools and, doing more outreach and education, which is great, I think. Another thing that I learned is that there is a glass foundry like a mile north of the Recology Materials Recovery Center. And that's one of the reasons why glass is actually a super good, easily recyclable material here in this part of the world. Otherwise, if you don't have something close, it's really heavy and really expensive to transport. But they are converting that glass lickety-split basically into bottles that our wineries use and bottles that our breweries use. So that's super cool. I did ask them and Jesse's not here, so she's going to miss this, but unlike what is the most unusual thing we found in our sewer pipes, we did ask them, what is the most unusual thing you found in the recycle? And they said, a llama head. A real llama head. And so that's a no-no on the recyclables, but everybody agreed that it could have been composted. So,
Could have been composted.
so anyway, it is, if they will offer the tours again, I encourage anybody on city staff who has any interest at all, or even if you're members of the public, to contact them there. It is very eye-opening and humbling about what you wheel to your curb every day or every week. So anyway, that's that.
Councilmember, I just want to make sure I caught one number. You said what percentage of the recyclables are in the garbage? Was it 60?
That's what I remember. If I'm
60 to
if I'm
70.
misrepresenting that, that's my bad, but that is what I remember. I wasn't taking notes. But they said of the total waste stream that's in solid waste, but potentially up to 60% of it could be pulled out to be recycled if it were sorted properly.
We've got a lot of work to do.
Opportunity.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor?
Wow, I couldn't have said that better myself, except I will add empty, clean, and dry, right?
Yes, empty, clean, and dry. You are so right.
Well done. So my one thing is we have the opportunity to nominate one of our students for a $1,500 scholarship. Applications are due March 9th to AWC's Center for Quality Communities. So I forwarded this to a couple of our school board members. Many thanks to Deb for bringing this to my attention. Our students can compete for the $1,500 award, and it's any kid going to college or technical school. And it honors their community service and commitment to community. So some of our students should look at that, or their parents should nudge their kids to look at that.
Jake?
I have two things. Well, I was on the Recology tour, and I got educated, as Lisa did as well, on what I've been doing wrong, which are plenty of things. But there are two things I talk about. One, I'm the liaison to the Parks and Recreation Department. I attended their monthly meeting about 2 weeks ago, and which was centered on pretty much on the pros questionnaire, which went out to 2,500 selected recipients or random recipients, I'm not sure which, in which anybody can, as between February 12th and March 3rd, access online. And the online responses are going to be, I don't want to say devalued, but they're less important since you could get on there and make 8 of those things, and they may be unrepresentative. So so that's something that's going on. The Parks and Rec is also going to be involved to some degree, and that's in the developmental stage of the Mercer, what's called Mercer Fest, which is something around July 11th. There's more detail to come with that because there are a group of volunteers, Mercer Island Foundation and the Mercer Island Historical Society, and some others are taking the lead in that. And there are some other people in the community that are looking to have other community events during the summer. So the idea being that the more of those things we have as community things that are off the balance sheet of the city at least are better. An example of that was that 4th of July picnic, which a bunch of us were at, if no other reason than a campaign. And but that attracted quite a few people, and so that's a template that people are looking at this point in time. I'd say that the Parks and Rec people are informed. They were asked really good questions, and my observation is there was very good interaction with the staff people. And I learned a bunch of things, and I spent about 2 hours the next day going through Aubrey Davis Park with Paul West to see what we're talking about versus the Aubrey Davis master plan and things that can be done and what some of the costs are. And I think the volunteers do a very good job. They're informed, and they ask really good questions. They interact very well with staff. That was my observation. The second thing is I'm liaison along with Craig, to the East Side Transportation Partnership, and they met on Friday, and I think you all got an agenda of that in email, and things went according to the agenda. So you're saying, well, that's not very informative, Jake. You can do better than that. So apart from approving minutes and talking about just routine administrative kind of things, the best part or the largest part of the meeting was taken up by two cities making presentations in a competition to get Federal Highway Administration grants. One was the City of Bothell, one was the City of Kirkland, and it was not clear who ultimately makes the decision in that. I think the Puget Sound Regional Council does, so there are several layers of stuff that goes on here. And it's obvious that it takes, there's a fair time component in this. That's to say that the project has to be fairly well put together and costed and graphicked in terms of what you're talking about and everything else. And so it's probably a year or two to point out, and I don't know whether we've looked at it as a city or not. The other thing was there were two things that were not on the agenda. One was City Council or County Councilman Kathy Lambert talked about having to break up a fight on a Sound Transit, either bus or train, I'm not sure which, and her concern that Sound Transit has been at this point very unresponsive about those kinds of incidents and what it's doing to deal with them. That's something we'll be wanting to think about before too much longer when we find out what's up their sleeves. The other one was a presentation, and there's a written piece by Will Knedlick, who's a Kirkland resident, longtime multimodal transportation advocate, and a very thoughtful information that because apparently ridership is declining in Metro, and looking at the reasons for it, the last mile or the lack of last mile stuff is, in his opinion, a contributing factor. So I've got 2 pages, and I'll forward it to you. I've plugged Craig in because he couldn't attend that morning. Some interesting things to think about, particularly as we look at down the road. Are we going to do something to get people from the south end to be using something multimodal aside from their bikes to get to either the trains or the buses or what have you? So I'll pass that out to you. And he's been, he's very thoughtful in a reflective sense about some of these issues. Certainly goes into great depth. So I'll send that on to you. The final thing was this meeting was at the Kleiss Mansion, which is out in Marymore Park. And so they said, well, we need a new venue. Mercer Island, would you be willing to host this? So I've told the city manager about this, and it might be a business opportunity for us because I think they can pay full fare. So it's a once a month kind of thing, and it would be a community center sort of activity. And whether it fits in the schedule or any of that, I don't know. But they're looking for a place to do something, so I figured, if they want to do it here and want to pay for it, why not? So here endeth the reading of the lesson.
Real quick, can you ask your consultant about VIA? I heard that's an interesting last mile solution pilot project happening somewhere.
I'll do that.
Sully? Okay, so I have a few things. First of all, on March 2nd, Deputy Mayor Weicker will be representing Mercer Island at a meeting convened by SCA representatives, basically to give an update on the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. And so hopefully we can get a report maybe March 10 or so. You should have recently received a meeting for April 23, 2020. This is tentatively the scheduled joint meeting with the Mercer Island School District Board. A few days ago, city manager and I met with the superintendent for the schools and also with Deborah Laurie, who's the board president. And I know we've talked about whether or not how useful these meetings are. But we made a point that if we're going to meet, we're going to have something on the agenda to meet and talk about. And so we thought that it was still a good time to actually hold this meeting because, there's 3 new council members and there's 2 new school board members. So actually it'll be a good time just to make sure that everybody knows who's who. It's also going to be an opportunity to actually go through all of the interlocal agreements that we have. There's actually quite a few, and it'll be a time to not only learn what the status of these ILAs are, but also talk in terms of what needs to be done. For instance, I know that our field maintenance is something that needs to be reviewed, and cost allocation discussions need to be had. Also, they promised to have the school enrollment projections at this meeting, which will be important for our discussions involving the GMA compliance. So that's something that could be kind of interesting. I think they're thinking that projections are holding firm, at least fairly steady. I don't know, they also predict some slight increase in the next 5 years. And then we've also, as you've heard, we had a 20th anniversary celebration of the Sister City Association with Tonon-Le-Ban. I will say that was a great experience. We have a joint resolution signed by both cities. We exchanged gifts. The Mercer Island Sister City Association gave a very nice glass blown plate to the city of Tonon. The Arts Council gave a very nice painting that was based upon one of our banners. And in return, they gave us, it's still to be framed, but they gave us at least it's 5 by 5 foot oil painting. And it's gorgeous. It's basically 3 sailboats on a lake, and it could be Lake Washington or it could be Lake Lemon. So it's gorgeous, but good luck in finding a place to put it. It could go back here, it could go who knows where, but it's quite substantial. And so, anyway, that's my report, and the next city council meeting will be a special meeting on Tuesday, March 10. The city council will now recess into executive session for approximately 60 minutes to discuss pending or potential litigation with legal counsel pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101 small I. No further action will be taken. Before we start the executive session, can we take a 7-minute break to 8:40, according to that clock? Okay.
The 2-minute fast.